Chapter 40. Psychic Drawing, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 40. Psychic Drawing, Part 1/2. Zhang Yingying had spoken about Luo Nan drawing a portrait without rhyme or reason, causing Luo Nan to observe her carefully once again. Honestly speaking, Zhang Yingying really did change, and it was a fairly large change at that. The aura of her body had transformed entirely. If Luo Nan were to draw her portrait now, the result absolutely wouldn't be like the one from when they played the game together, possessing the intense look of victory or defeat. Was her mood actually influenced this greatly? Mr. Luo. He Yuan's voice propagated through the hexaear with some information to the side. Please enter encrypted channel 001. Okay. Luo Nan abided with her request, entering into what seemed to be a module established at the last minute. A simple interface should have already been set up inside, but Luo Nan wasn't certain on the specific contents. He could only see information pertaining to himself and the human-faced arachnid, and the information was constantly being updated with new information at this time to always be changing. Was this a pre-installed template of the hexaear? Or was this built by He Yuan? If it was the latter, Luo Nan could only exclaim in admiration over He Yuan's powerful control over the mental plane. I hope we can collect some information before we start the meeting as a basis for determining our strategic decisions. Mr. Luo doesn't mind, right? Luo Nan responded sincerely. I don't even know how I should describe some of the things. No problem. Just providing the information first. Hand is fine. Before, when you were in the elevator, other than your friend Xue Lei. Other than Mr. Xue blocking the black wolf, you should have caused the human-faced arachnid to be impeded in some way. Is this correct? Luo Nan rolled his eye back in the dark. Why was the first question so sharp? However, the heavily chained crow molded from his grandfather's formatting theory was a grand and impressive achievement. Luo Nan couldn't wait to proclaim this achievement. He didn't have sentimental thoughts that stopped him. But what he wanted to avoid was nothing more than revealing his relationship with the human-faced arachnid and his hidden card of having psychic intuition. The current problem was that he absolutely wouldn't be able to explain things in such a short time, so he could only express things in a rather brief and regretful way. I felt that there was some sort of negative existence in the elevator at that time, so I tried using my chains to inhibit it. Chains. Luo Nan was waiting for this question. He took a deep breath to express his words as clearly as possible. This is in accordance with my grandfather's theory. I constructed a sort of format on the mental plane. Its usage is to quell abnormal states in the body and mind. He Yuan asked in curiosity. A format built on the mental plane. Do you mean the formatting theory's archetype formats? Luo Nan's original mood was rather worked up, but then it was as if his mood was suddenly doused with ice. Cold water. He really wanted to roar in response, what if *king archetype formats? But soon he thought of the origins to the strength displayed by He Yuan in the elevator. Wasn't it none other than the format of fire? In the hearts of burners like her, Yan Hong's archetype formatting theory was certainly the cornerstone of strength. They wouldn't accept anything else. He had actually wanted to expound on his grandfather's theory in earnest. He was really stupid for wanting to. Luo Nan's mood dropped down in a flash, no longer caught up in a desire to explain. He just responded. I don't know what special terms you all use, but the general meaning is like this. This theory looks to be quite interesting. I hope Mr. Luo would discuss the theory with me in earnest when there is a chance. He Yuan was just like an outstanding host. She would never reject her people's words in rashness. Yet she grasped the crux of the subject all this time. Mr. Luo. Can you describe what you experienced when you faced off against the human-faced arachnid? For example, the abilities displayed by the human-faced arachnid. Luo Nan didn't respond immediately, for he was trying to sort out his response in order to preserve his hidden cards. He would need some time. From feeling Luo Nan's hesitation, He Yuan didn't stick with the roles of questioner and listener, she first shared her own experience. Actually, I cooperated with my comrades yesterday to annihilate a clone of the human-faced arachnid. The one that we encountered today was clearly far different than the one from yesterday. Yesterday? Where? Luo Nan wasn't quite expecting this. Mr. Luo should know where the source of the human-faced arachnid incident is. It was right above the RD district, in the air, on the military transport ship Lanshan. It was her. That blade aura. No doubt about it. The door to Luo Nan's memories had been a bit loose. Now that door was wide open. He took this lean woman in front of him and integrated this image with his memories of the deep blue walker slaying the burning wraith with a cross-blade slash from yesterday morning on the transport ship. That sensation from the blade's aura fit completely. Yes. She was the slayer who had beheaded and vanquished the burning wraith. Sure enough, this was a small world full of coincidences. Luo Nan really didn't feel much, even though they ought to have some hate between them. Anyway, he suddenly spurted out the question he had stuffed in his stomach. Sister, he doesn't need the deep blue exo-armor to ignite the format of fire. The real question he wanted to ask was as follows. Why did I feel that the strength you displayed in the elevator was a factor stronger than what you displayed in the armor? What a pity. This sort of question would expose himself. He could only stuff it into his stomach. He Yuan wasn't surprised of Luo Nan's certainty that she was a deep blue walker. Deep blue walkers and burners had a synonymous relationship in this world. Starting from the third generation of burners, the format of fire can exist even when casting off the exo-armor. After all, technology is constantly improving. He Yuan did not explain in further depth. Instead, she returned and elaborated more on the original topic. Compared to the one I annihilated before, this human-faced arachnid's clone possessed capabilities of interfering with reality that were clearly much stronger. To be able to forcefully infect and control an awakened such as the Black Wolf, and to extract life force at high speeds. If the clone on the warship was like this one, we would have had a hard time succeeding in surrounding and killing it. Luo Nan used the hexaear to thumb through the society's materials and linked them with his own experiences. In the end, he found nothing that was illogical. It should have consumed much of its kind. 8-10 of them accumulated together. Its abilities would naturally be on a higher level. He Yuan responded. As of now, there have only been 2 cases of success from the start of the search and destroy operation with the human-faced arachnid in the entirety of Xia City, not counting the one here. Other than that, there are 3 cases of defeat. Though there isn't more detailed information, from the brief you can see that this clone of the human-faced arachnid we faced displayed a strength on another level. This was also the first case where an awakened was forcefully infected. I didn't mention this before, but I feel that the most important issue lies in how the information is determined. Purely relying on the power of the society's psychics would make it impossible for a valid series of information to occur. Other than this, Quantum Corporation certainly has its reservations. The high-ranking members of the military and the society have already re-entered the RD district for reconnaissance, in hopes of new discoveries. The sound of a door interrupted their conversation. The ability users, who had been scattered on the various floors of the building, arrived one after another. Each person had a different appearance, but they shared a single common ground: they were rather curious towards Luo Nan and He Yuan. Zhang Yingying raised her head as well, pumping herself up to help with introductions. Frankly speaking, Luo Nan really didn't commit too many of them to memory, he just remembered that the Black Beetle hadn't come. It looked like that one no longer put on any false pretenses of respect. Chapter 40. Psychic Drawing, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Since everyone had all sat down, He Yuan no longer engaged in a lone conversation with Luo Nan and began the meeting. With her battle achievement of solely causing the human-faced arachnid's clone in the elevator to retreat, with the previous analysis of the issues, and of course with a faint military background, Hiyuan had already established her position within the society. She took charge of the meeting and there was no one who challenged her, at least on the surface. Luo Nan, however, was still situated as being a target of observation. Lines and lines of sight fell onto his face, all of which were filled with pondering and curiosity. There were no traces of concealment. Luo Nan was also observing them. If the operation were to continue, his own safety would be influenced to a great degree by these people. Obviously, he shouldn't be carefree and neglectful. He didn't commit much of the initial introductions to memory, but he was diligent during the meeting. Speaking of which, Luo Nan really admired his secretary. He only found out during the introductions that Hiyuan had just retired from the military. It hasn't been a day since she entered the Wilderness Explorer Society. She was like him, a newbie. Though they had the same experience, Hiyuan took all the names and nicknames of the members of the meeting and committed them clearly to memory. The exchanges in the meeting went completely unhindered and she demonstrated a thorough understanding of the patrol intervals and regions for the areas of the pub that each person had watch over. This wasn't just an issue that was determined by faculty of mind, but also of due diligence. Speaking of the meeting, the initial formalities were relatively casual. Hiyuan didn't follow up with one subject after another. Instead, she acted according to the same style as in the conversation with Luo Nan, chatting to gather information from all parties. Luo Nan had yet to exit from channel 001, and so he was able to clearly see the template being adjusted with newer content at lightning speeds. The design map of Limestone Water Village Pub contained more and more detailed markers representing routes and trajectories. He could see that Hiyuan was trying to reverse engineer the movements of the human-faced arachnid, to see how it had afflicted the black wolf. However, Luo Nan was unable to see the result as of yet. This kind of deduction through direct observation was quite the familiar feeling for Luo Nan. He opened his notebook subconsciously. The flexible e.ink screen still had the drawing software open, displaying what he considered to be a total mess of lines. The abstraction of the wraith sign and the precision of the composition were eye-catching. The drawing interface was left off right when he sensed the existence of the human-faced arachnid, the moment before he warned Shuele. Luo Nan was somewhat spellbound looking at the chaotic lines on the interface. He was able to verify that he absolutely didn't genuinely see the human-faced arachnid the instant when he had drawn the wraith sign. What stimulated him was a sort of intense yet fuzzy sensation. It was similar to the sort of incomparably mysterious intuition. Luo Nan wasn't unfamiliar with this sort of feeling. When he made additions to his drawings, the self-portrait with the prison building, the sketch that captured Li Xuecheng, they all used a certain intuition and insight that transformed into detailed lines before turning into successes. If he were to use the concept of a psychic described by Zhang Yingying as a standard, he would be barely able to rely on this as an ability. Bang! Someone had pounded on the table during the meeting, disturbing Luo Nan. That person was discontent towards Hiyuan. Luo Nan raised his head and only then discovered that some ability users were caught up in an inexplicable argument. It seemed that as the details of the conversation gradually penetrated deeper into the topic, a few issues were sparked. Under a mild state, everyone was all happy faces and there looked to be no difference between them. But now, practically everyone in the meeting room had become moody, reflecting in their faces differently. Some were fretful, some were angry, some were distracted, some were at a loss, some were detached. Each was different. Luo Nan felt that this was all very interesting. He took out his digital pen and the pen dropped to the surface of the flexible e.ink screen to sketch. What had been chaotic lines underwent a few embellishments, transforming into a turbid and rapidly flowing river. The structure of the wraith sign vanished under the closely knit lines. Then he sketched the outlines of a few fishlings within these lines. Perhaps they were undulating along with the river's spray, perhaps they were leaping out of the water's surface, perhaps they were swimming at the river's floor in secret. The attitudes and temperaments of the fishlings were all different, representing a certain few individuals in the conference room. But there was a bit that was the same. Every fishling was within the ebb and flow of the river, being influenced by the spray of the river. And so, Luo Nan symbolized the complicated emotions and intentions in this way. Next, Luo Nan drew a small boat on the river with chains and an anchor hanging down the side of it. This symbolized himself. Perhaps he originally was also one of the members stuck in the ebb and flow of the river, but because he had the heavily chained crow to anchor him in place, he was somewhat able to transcend from it. As for He Yuan, her mood was similar to his. As a burner, she possessed the power of a format. She was like a reef within the water that was being scrubbed in every way, but she wasn't affected at all. As for the human-faced arachnid, it was a hunter concealed deep in the river. It drew in negative emotions and waited for an opportunity to act. It could pervade itself into any of the others and exert its influence, but against Luo Nan and He Yuan, it could only meet force with force. This was where Luo Nan's superiority lay. The tip of his pen continued to go along as Luo Nan suddenly had a train of thought become clear. The human-faced arachnid didn't select the black wolf as its victim by coincidence. How could it have the luck to randomly select an awakened? Thinking about it, Shuelei was a resource of excellent quality, his life force was abundant, a top-grade tonic. Perhaps the human-faced arachnid had picked through every single person present here. It had made contact with each one, only no one was able to discover it yet. Yes. An apparition had once hovered over everyone's heads. It then selected the one it liked the most unfortunate black wolf. And now the wraith sign, which had disappeared within the turbid river, used piercing and crossing lines to link up with each fish. Mr. Luo. Hick. What? Luo Nan was startled out of his spellbound state, discovering that someone had called out to him. A tall and skinny youth had spoken out. His nickname should be Bamboo Pole. His face was always smiling and laughing, looking to be happy and go lucky. But his words were extremely sharp. There's no need to speak more of the accuracy and acuity of Mr. Luo's psychic ability. There's already factual evidence. So what's the range you can cover? From Vice President He's explanation, we need to center on psychics to create our tactics. Are we going to do close combat or long-range bombardment? We need to get this clear right. Luo Nan forced a smile and looked towards Zhang Yingying. You were the one who made me wear this hat, you explain. Zhang Yingying returned with a glare, but she still opened her mouth. Luo Nan has just entered the society. He doesn't understand anything. We need to let old you evaluate him and give him pointers. He at least needs the basic concepts. But the bamboo pole did not spare them. I've heard that Mr. Luo's psychic ability is divination through drawing. I've been looking at you drawing and sketching all this time. Do you sense something psychically? Oh, not necessarily. Luo Nan obviously wouldn't say that he was drawing portraits of them, that he even felt you all had been consumed to some degree. When Luo Nan heard his own voice, he discovered that it seemed like he had been targeted. This ability user had enough of arguing with the other members and started to vent outwards. It would be hard to deal with He Yuan, so the ability user chose him as a pushover to bully. When all was said and done, his reasoning wasn't convincing. I saw everything. The woman, who had raised her hand and laughed, had the nickname, Cat Eyes. She was probably just over 30 years old and she had a scorching hot body with heavy makeup on. She looked just like a dancer at a club. Luo Nan had a deep impression of her because of her ability. She could perceive things at super-far distances and was extremely similar to a psychic. But her ability was not at all effective against darksider life forms. She played a scout-like role in the team. Luo Nan was educated right now. There was a large table separating the two in the conference room, with a distance of at least 7-8 meters between them. She could still see what he drew. People were already getting rowdy right now. Kitty, what did he draw? It's okay if Mr. Luo is shy. We can go head over. Yeah. This is my first time seeing this kind of type. Kitty, give us an interpretation, K. With a glance of an eye, one could tell that Cat Eyes was the type who liked to watch the world burn. She was unconcerned with Luo Nan's expression as she spoke out, describing with giggles. This drawing has a very chaotic look to it. It's like a river, and on the river is a boat and a reef. Beneath the surface are swimming fish. Go on. Then. Luo Nan was somewhat helpless against this sort of nosy character. He wanted to put away his digital pen, but the tip slightly sank a bit. It was like there was an incorporeal wire twined around the pen. Suddenly there was a response on the mental plane. The chains crackled as they trembled, and the wraith sign in front was flickering with radiance. Luo Nan moved his pen unconsciously. A marvelous sensation then emerged. It seemed like he had caught onto something. Cat Eyes had been bursting laughter, but she suddenly went mute at this very moment. Blood seeped out of the corner of her eyes and she fell backward. Chapter 41. Dark Ritual, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 41. Dark Ritual, Part 1/2. The chairs within the conference room were quite stable. Cat Eyes' body collided with the back of her chair, causing it to rock slightly. Then the chair pushed her body forward. Her entire body was soft like noodles. Clearly, she had lost consciousness. Cat Eyes rocked 2 more times before finally falling forward. Her forehead slammed onto the conference table with a muffled bang. Then there was no reaction from her whatsoever. The pen in Luo Nan's hand suddenly stopped moving. There was another reason for this aside from Cat Eyes' strange behavior. A flood of indistinct chaos suddenly exploded in front of his eyes at this very moment. Accompanied with it were the signals of far bizarre sounds, smells, and so on. They too rushed over him. This wasn't the stimulation of his senses by the outside environment, but rather a direct transfer of informational signals to his nervous system. There was no orderly logic, no separation between primary and secondary, it was just a horde that came swarming over. Luo Nan was already extremely familiar with how to face this enormous quantity of information. He didn't try analyzing it at all. Instead, he fed the information through the heavily chained crow and into the external neuron. Luo Nan had undergone an extremely similar experience that he could compare to, so he understood generally how this sudden and unforeseen situation came about. This rude and impetuous woman Cat Eyes had just used her ability to spy on Luo Nan's work just now in the conference room. She scarcely imagined that this piece of work was part of the manifestation of Luo Nan's ability on the mental plane. Frankly speaking, her act of spying was extremely stupid. What Cat Eyes did was the same as swapping places with the human-faced arachnid. She took the initiative to deliver herself over right when Luo Nan was the most active on the mental plane. She was then pierced through by the heavily chained crow. The heavily chained crow and the wraith sign were unrestrained in tearing a piece off of her, and that piece even contained the memories Cat Eyes' super-far perception and related abilities. For the specific content, Luo Nan would need the analysis of the external neuron. Bang! Some people had slammed the table when seeing Cat Eyes' miserable appearance. Mr. Luo, boy. What the hell are you up to? Bang! People next to Luo Nan also slammed the table. You bunch of C***NTS. What the hell are you messing around for when a psychic is doing work? The one who stood and roared was Zhang Yingying. Perhaps she had some instinct of protection in her heart towards the talent she had uncovered with her own hands. She stood up and tore a new one without the slightest restraint against her own friends. Her imposing aura challenged the heavens, and she was peerless for a time. When old Yu roasts his turtle shell, would you try pouring water on it? When old Gao is practicing, would you try smashing his altar? When old Bai enters his dream, would you try slapping his face? If you don't understand courtesies, you should at least understand what's taboo. You think you can target a psychic at any time and anywhere for bullying, BDNVL. Then the blame rotated over. It didn't matter if they had accepted it or not, the group of ability users was dumbstruck and speechless. And at this moment, Cat Eye's shoulder moved, an indication that she was starting to recover consciousness. The people beside her gathered around her to look. It took approximately 5-6 seconds before Cat Eyes finally came to. Under the support of people helping her up on the seat, Cat Eyes blinked her eyes with a blank face of loss. What is going on? She couldn't have lost her memories. Someone extended their fingers towards her. Kitty, how many do I have holding up? Get lost. The long manicured fingers swiped over. Cat Eye's strength was not lacking at all. She had soon returned to her normal state and began to feel annoyed at the excessive number of people surrounding her. She waved people away. What happened just now? Explain it clearly to me. How should I know? Cat Eyes spoke with a sharp and piercing tone, but when she faced to look at Luo Nan, she was clearly a bit meek. I was just looking at the drawing. Then his body's energy suddenly changed. Looks like this toy of a drawing is really quite terrifying. Gak. More than half the people rolled their eyes back. It's fine to just look at a drawing, but why did you touch his energy? When a psychic is doing work, his energy is coming and going, rising and lowering. It's the same as a combatant in a life or death struggling state. One bad move would cause a surge of negative feedback. Who knows what the result would be? Zhang Yingying slammed the table at once. Kitty. Do you have a special wish for death? Cat Eyes was clearly a bit embarrassed. I was just testing it. I was just curious, Kay. There's only a few psychics in the society, and each of them hides tightly away. It's quite rare to have such an interesting young lad. Mr. Luo. He Yuan completely ignored the disturbance from this group of unreliable people. She had noticed that it had already been a long time since Luo Nan had opened his mouth to speak. Zhang Yingying turned around upon hearing He Yuan and saw Luo Nan with eyes half opened, his face an expression of stupefaction. It seemed like he too had lost consciousness. Cat Eyes. She was no longer cordial, not calling her by Kitty, directly calling her by her nickname. This was proof that Zhang Yingying was furious now. Don't you understand that Luo Nan's just a newbie? And he's a gifted class. Not a systematic class. He doesn't know of any taboos. Especially since he's a psychic, it's too late for protection. And you purposely jabbed him. Do you have the intelligence of a professional? Regardless if it was Cat Eyes or her friends beside her, all knew that they had charged into calamity. Each one had their heads shrink back, and they uttered not a word. He Yuan pressed against her ear and she frowned towards Zhang Yingying at this moment. I haven't been able to contact old you all this time. He's probably in a psychic state. I don't know the way to contact Gao and Bai. You get in contact with them. Ask them how to handle this sort of situation. Oh. Okay. Zhang Yingying knew that they had an emergency situation. She immediately abided with the request. Cough. I'm not a gifted class. I'm a systematic class. The voice suddenly sounded forth and Luo Nan's half-drooping eyes opened completely. He corrected Zhang Yingying's misunderstanding once more. After an instant of shock, Zhang Yingying was delighted. She wanted to pat Luo Nan on the shoulder, but after thinking about it, she ended up not daring to. She just patted him under the desk in passing. Just as long as you're fine. You're a systematic class from now on. If there's anyone who's ignorant and dares to say you're a gifted class, this old woman will cleave them in half. As she spoke, her gaze swept over a few unreliable fellows across the table. Cat Eyes raised her hand immediately to surrender. Yep. You're a systematic class. No doubt about it. With the primary instigator of the situation already surrendering, all the others humphed and could only tacitly agree to this preposterous classification. Yuan's cold and firm finger pressed against the side of Luo Nan's neck to feel the blood flow of his artery. The other hand was placed on Luo Nan's forehead. She asked gently. You don't have blood congestion in the head, no blood deficiency symptoms. Any dizziness? Any loss of vision? Luo Nan shook his head somewhat embarrassed. I'm fine. There was really nothing wrong with Luo Nan. His consciousness was super clear from the start. He was just completely focused on the external neuron, so he didn't respond to the external world. The two pieces of information he had scooped could both be described as enormous. But when compared to each other, the contents of Cat Eye's super.far perceptions data file was really negligible. The external neuron was still in the middle of analyzing the human-faced arachnid's information. But Cat Eye's data was completely able to be decoded to completion in a short dozen or so seconds. Luo Nan stirred telepathically and the interface of the flexible E.ink screen emerged on his retinas. He noticed that the number of icons on the interface had undergone a change once again. Chapter 41. Dark Ritual, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. It was just like what happened in the underground laboratory. An additional icon had appeared on the flexible E.ink screen's main interface. It wasn't the formerly existing gear, but an extremely familiar shape. The tetrahedron with its inscribed sphere and outer scribed sphere. Luo Nan's visualization diagram. Only, the entire body of the icon was dark, as if it was some application that was being downloaded. It had yet to finish downloading and installing, so most of it was hidden amongst the shadows. Only an extremely small portion was lit up. The progress displayed was 1%. Indeed, it was unexpectedly slow. Luo Nan swept his thoughts over and he was able to clarify some fundamental information, but along with it came puzzlement. In the end, what kind of unit was the piece he scooped from the human-faced arachnid? In accordance with the subject, shouldn't it be the same type of unit as the wraith sign? What relationship did it have with the visualization diagram? These questions would have to wait until the download. Hic. The analysis was complete before he would get his answer. Luo Nan paid attention to another matter as well. The result of Cat Eye's analysis wasn't displayed on the main interface. He felt that there was a layer separating him if he wished to access it. There seemed to be some gateways inside. Hello. Hello. You're okay, right? Zhang Yingying saw that Luo Nan had inexplicably re-entered a spellbound state after his short two-sentence response. Uncertainty grew in the hearts of Zhang Yingying and all the others in the conference room. The profession of the psychic involved, for the most part, things on the mental plane that were the mysterious of the mysterious. Things that were really hard to grasp. Of the few psychics in the society, other than the old and virtuous Yu whose training went deep making it hard to tell his peculiarities, the other psychics were somewhat neurotic. It said that this wasn't related to any feedback damage received from using their abilities at an early age. Zhang Yingying couldn't hold back from glaring at Cat Eyes with anger. No one imagined that Luo Nan would awaken his gaze at this very moment. He followed in synchronous with Zhang Yingying to look straight at Cat Eyes. Cat Eyes was already a bit immune to Zhang Yingying's furious glare. But she was unable to see what meaning was hidden in Luo Nan's gaze. Her heart changed all of a sudden and she felt a bit inexplicably nervous. Hey. What was she getting nervous for? Her emotions were far too abnormal, and even Cat Eyes couldn't stand for this to go on. She was a troublemaker at heart who didn't care about causing big problems. She was carefree and whimsical, her guts exceeding the norm. She had always boasted herself in this way. But why did she feel her heart be shaky and waning ever since she stirred up trouble just a moment ago? She really did turn into a good little kitty. Now when she directly faced Luo Nan, she continued to emit a weak aura. In the end, Her self-awareness caused her to strike back. She had friendly relations with Zhang Yingying, so she could let Zhang Yingying's roar slide. But you're a cub. Cat Eyes bulged her eyes wide open on the spot, returning a glare to Luo Nan. Her mouth was even less restrained. What's wrong? Do you want some compensation? Fine. I'll sleep with you, okay? She had observed Luo Nan. This introverted kid whelp would most likely be unable to ward her off. In the end, he would need Zhang Yingying to get him out of this predicament. Then she'll just pester endlessly for a round, give a similar argument, and things will be okay. But the problem was that the gaze from Luo Nan that fell over her contained no decipherable emotions whatsoever. The gaze was also unaffected by any external emotions, and that included the deliberate provocation from Cat Eyes. Luo Nan glanced to the side and saw that Zhang Yingying was about to slam the table again, so he just nodded towards Cat Eyes. Come over and help me out, alright. The people in the conference room looked at each other in dismay. Cat Eyes pointed a finger at herself. Me. Wait up. This sort of position really sucks. Cat Eyes wanted to flip out, but Luo Nan already had his head lowered with the digital pen falling on the flexible e.ink screen once again. Such a young age. What are you playing at? Cat Eyes went ha with a laugh, but an omen suddenly leaped over to Luo Nan from the surface of the table. 12 centimeters high heels raised to the skies in hatred, and the ground below was absolutely quiet. Her skill was in agility, and she was just like a giant cat. The odor of her perfume, which was dense to the point of dizziness, covered the entire area. She braced against the table with one hand, and half her body transformed into a shadow that fell onto the flexible e.ink screen held in Luo Nan's hand. Hey, kid. You faker. You want me to help you? Could it be that you can't draw your picture and you want to find someone to blame when you fail? Luo Nan gave her glance and only felt that this woman was unreasonable. But his sudden burst of insight was extremely valuable. He wouldn't let this opportunity slip away. He simply lowered his head to look directly at the flexible e.ink screen. He had something to say though. Don't talk. Also, try your best to not let your imagination run wild in your mind. Look at my drawing. What are your thoughts? You still want to hurt me? Cat Eyes thought back to her miserable bloody seeping state, and her mind went a bit weak. The imposing aura that she had just barely unleashed suddenly declined. Zhang Yingying gave her another stubborn push from behind. I've been watching this exchange go on for nearly a dozen rounds. You got Jack sh*t. Are you seeking your own death? Who knows, maybe you two are getting it on. Cat Eyes blurted a response in mockery. Her eyes were squinted, it appeared she wanted to look but also didn't dare to. Shut up. Luo Nan's commanding words entered Cat Eyes' ears. Something sprouted in her mind, and she spoke no longer. Her eyes opened a bit wider as they looked at the surface of Luo Nan's flexible e.ink screen. Before, she had only used her super.far perception to scan this drawing, discovering nothing out of the ordinary about it. But this time she complied with Luo Nan's order, her vision dropped onto it, and she felt that the drawing was entirely different this time. The various forms of shapes on the sketch was plentiful in number. For example, there was the small boat with chains going off the side, there was the reef that faced the wind and welcomed the waves. Both were extremely eye-catching. But for some inexplicable reason, the focal point of her gaze rested fixed within the turbid river, onto a fish that seemed to be swimming in spirals. It's very similar to me. Absurd thoughts attacked her mind, and she saw Luo Nan's digital pen drop down onto the surroundings of the fish she was concentrated on. He had pulled out several more lines from the fish's body. It was strange just talking about it. Her consciousness went somewhat dazed when these lines appeared. It was as if these lines weren't resting on the flexible e.ink screen, but rather pulled out from her actual body. There was an incorporeal apparition that was at work, probing out. It caressed gently and softly, cutting into her inner organs and her skull, dissecting her completely. Right when Luo Nan's intentions became clear, Cat Eye's body went stiff on the spot. Seeing Luo Nan draw on the spot, seeing the high pressure he exerted, the group of ability users became curious. They congregated all around him, surrounding him in a circle. From their perspective, the drawing Luo Nan drew was very chaotic at first glance, but it was also very visually stimulating. What had been a composition of a river with chaotic weaving lines then turned inexplicably into clearer tracks under the pulling of the pen's blade. Clearly, these lines represented the route the fishlings took to their current position. Some people's minds operated faster than others. They were able to dimly understand that Luo Nan was tracing back to what had happened before. Psychics could trace things back, they could find out what happened in the past. The conference room was just silent for a time. No one dared to disturb the work of a genuine psychic. Sister he. Luo Nan had suddenly opened his mouth again as an action of habit. But soon he came to and he transferred to the psychic wave network, entering channel 001 to converse with He Yueyin. This time an inexplicable diagram emerged in the design map of Limestone Water Village pub. He tried to find the matching region in the pub, but the problem was he wasn't too familiar with this place. He could only ask for He Yueyin's help. The tiny actions between He Yueyin and Luo Nan could not be concealed from the others. The group of ability users could see what was up even if they didn't use their heads. They spilled into the encrypted comms in a flurry, entering channel 001. The only person who didn't do so was Cat Eyes. She was completely unable to spare the energy at this time. Her black fishnet stockings were unable to stop her legs from trembling. If she hadn't used her hand to support herself on the table, she would have long fallen to her knees on the ground. That apparition, that incorporeal apparition. It had dissected her completely, yet that still wasn't enough for it. It began to consume in greed. Cat Eyes could only feel her energy rapidly draining away, her consciousness grew increasingly dizzier. And the source of all this was. She could see it. The tip of the pen never stopped while it moved on the flexible E.ink screen. It seemed to flow on the surface. Any minute strokes were heavy bombardments against her on the mental plane. Luo Nan. It could only be Luo Nan. This devil. She thought about the whole course of events from beginning to end and things suddenly became clear. This was clearly a plot, a trap, in full view of a crowd. A demonic ritual was being launched undisguised. Chapter 42. Mystic Society, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 42. Mystic Society, Part 1/2. Cat Eyes felt her thoughts become unprecedentedly clear under the stimulation of anger. She was going to expose this demon's plot, so she gaped her mouth open to shout on the spot. But it was only then did she discover that all the muscles of her body no longer listened to her. Her fury was just a short burst of flame. Boundless waves of terror had risen and extinguished it. At the very moment, all of Cat Eyes' energy was dissolved within the giant waves of terror, and her self-willpower also dissolved along with it. Emotions of remorse began to emerge within this sea of terror. This demon. Did he have me as his target from the start? Or is it because I offended him? God, I'm so stupid. Cat Eyes was full of remorse. She was just like a sacrifice placed upon an altar. Her body didn't move and she uttered not a word. Even her thoughts gradually froze and perished. All that was left was her blood and soul, and they flowed out one drop after another. It was unknown where they flowed to. She tried to find the destination of her blood and soul, but it was as if she had been dropped into a boundless prison within her dazzled and blurred mind. 6 sources of glowing light lit up within the treacherous shadowy coldness of the stirring darkness. A vague outline revolved in her surroundings. Several feet scurried around, gradually drawing closer. Her frozen consciousness suddenly trembled for she received some stimulation. It came from the distinct memory of the profile of the operations target. Human-faced arachnid. Why is it the human-faced arachnid? No one was able to answer her question within this dizziness. No one to relieve her of her terror. As the form of the human-faced arachnid became clear, the surrounding screen of darkness came alive to possess its own intentions. It drew endlessly closer to her, and the warped darkness in front of the human-faced arachnid was none other than its giant ugly mouth. She was going to be chewed, dissolved, then consumed. No. No way. Cat Eyes suddenly comprehended something, and the source of this understanding came from the mental senses of being an awakened. It didn't matter if this was a demonic ritual, if this was a trap, if she was really consumed by the human-faced arachnid, she would inevitably sink to a place of damnation with no hope of recovery. She would never have another chance. Save me. Save me. Someone save me. Cat Eyes was gradually losing consciousness on the mental plane as she shouted herself hoarse. But on the physical plane, she was doing nothing more than just slightly trembling with a drooping head. The more she felt the reality of her situation, the more she despaired. In the end, what kind of power was it that imprisoned her in this terrifying darkness? Was there no power that could save her? Crackle. An unusual vibration rang out of the darkness. From the deepest depths of the darkness came long glimmering chains that pierced over in an instant. This change was completely incomprehensible to Cat Eyes. But when faced with the desperate situation of being consumed by the human-faced arachnid, she would strive to grasp onto any variable to change that. If both were desperate situations, then she would choose the one that was less evil. Her entire consciousness concentrated over there. She did the utmost to shout. Save me! Save me! The chains clearly responded to her cry, crackling and rattling as they penetrated through space. Cat Eyes had zero intentions of avoiding them. She let the chains run through her body and pierce her soul. It wasn't painful, instead, she had the strange feeling of being supported. She let the chains permeate through her body as much as possible, to extend to every nook and cranny in her body and mind. The crackling sound was no longer heard, and in its place was the bizarre, ka-chunk sound of locking. Every ka-chunk that sounded out was the sound of some chain link locking rigidly in place. From Cat Eyes' perspective, this represented a safety rope on her body in face of danger. Every locking of a chain link gave a fantastic feeling of safety and satisfaction. Then Cat Eyes felt herself rising up to gradually leave this sheet of darkness. Her strength was also gradually recovering, and more of her consciousness entered the plane of reality. She felt faintly that something was off. The incomparably real experience on the mental plane clashed with reality. It was as if she was placed in a half-awake dream-like state. Everything that was inconceivable was as they should be to her. She even entered the psychic wave network independently to channel 001 where everyone was gathered. This time she had the strength to unleash the cry that she wasn't able to unleash before. But as soon as this thought emerged in her mind, the large terror and uncertainty in front of her popped this thought as if it were a bubble. The chain ran through her soul body and she relied on it for support, but she had a certain feeling that if the chain were to just vibrate slightly, it would twist and kill her. In other words, her life could be decided by a single thought from the chain's controller. This was completely illogical, but in her dim and confusing consciousness state, Cat Eyes didn't have the courage to verify this. She just wanted this wretched operation to end faster right now, so she could sort out the logic behind the chains. Perhaps, the controller of the chains was. Cat Eyes let her gaze fall onto Luo Nan's body. It was him. This devil. Just give her an explanation, okay? But Luo Nan didn't give her a single glance from beginning to end, a single indication. This was enough to cause Cat Eyes to feel like everything that had just happened might have been her own delusions from a mental disorder. Astonishing progress appeared on channel 001 at this time. Low clamoring could be heard within the encrypted comms. There's a match. There's a match. Where is it? Everyone's attention gathered over, and that included Cat Eye's attention. Dream and reality joined together, permeating into one another. Everything turned logical and as it should be. Channel 001 had already turned into a conference channel at this time. Cat Eyes was slow in the coming, not drawing anyone's attention. Everyone's attention was placed on the design map of Limestone Water Village pub. The diagram that Luo Nan took out corresponded exactly with a certain portion of the map. This picture of Luo Nan's was an alienation in the form of 6 shining stars. The corners were slightly rounded. This type of composition didn't exist on any single floor of the building. However, He Yuan changed her line of thinking and placed the planar map of every floor on top of each other. Then the answer suddenly became clear. It's the 16th, 17th, 18th floor on the west side, 3 different room locations on 3 different floors pieced together. They belong to some karaoke club. He Yuan had reached a conclusion after referring to the data on the pub. The relevant material was immediately converted to psychic wave information, entering everyone's brains. Even though He Yuan had the support of Hexaear, this action by her was an extremely high-level manipulation of the mental plane. Typical awakened would find it hard to even look up at her back. But no one expressed astonishment or shock at this time. This was because all shocking emotions were already crammed in by Luo Nan long ago. Zhang Yingying's question represented practically everyone in the room. What does this location represent? Where the human-faced arachnid is hiding. I believe that this is only a place where it had once passed through. And this place had a very crucial use for it to get into its present state. Luo Nan honestly and sincerely explained according to his own feelings towards his drawing. He felt that he was becoming more and more like a psychic. But you've only been to the 21st floor, you haven't been here, right? Hick. I haven't. You haven't been there in the past either. This is my first time coming here. Even though the large living community around Acumen College had an outstanding reputation, this was really Luo Nan's first time coming here. From another side, Bamboo Pole could not hold himself back from asking in doubt. Then how did you come up with this picture? From a baseless feeling. Luo Nan continued to respond. I haven't been there, but Cat Eyes should have. All of a sudden, every gaze in the room fell uniformly onto Cat Eyes. Chapter 42. Mystic Society, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. When faced with everyone's gazes, Cat Eyes suddenly had a funny feeling of ridiculousness. You are all here looking for the human-faced arachnid. Don't you know that there's a fellow here who could snatch away food from the jaws of the human-faced arachnid? And that he's sitting right next to you all. But in the end, she could only respond dazed. I've been to the 18th floor, and I've passed through the karaoke place. But I didn't detect no 6 glowing stars. Cat Eyes didn't use the psychic wave network, she had directly used her mouth. This allowed her to feel a bit closer to reality. No one was able to comprehend her current mood, and everyone thought back to the matter of when Luo Nan had requested Cat Eyes' help. Immediately there was someone who couldn't refrain from shouting. Holy sh*T. This is memory reading plus digging of the unconscious mind. Is it Old Bai's dream entering method? The results that Old Bai gets are completely chaotic. How is it this clear? It's completely abstract and not easy to decipher. Hey kitty, does it feel good to be deeply dug into? Finally, there was someone who was concerned about Cat Eyes' state. But when this comedy sketch opened up, Cat Eyes used her 12-centimeter high heels to respond. A cry of pain. The one who had spoken crudely knelt to the ground hugging his foot. He Yuan clapped her hands to gather everyone's attention over. Whatever the case may be, we will need to perform a survey of the area to strive for a better understanding of the mystery behind the increased strength of the human-faced arachnid. At the same time, we can perform some drill practices. At least this meeting produced some results. In the situation where the human-faced arachnid was undetectable, Yuan convinced this group of ability users the need to formulate tactics revolving around Luo Nan. Only then would they guarantee results and safety. They could only make tentative plans due to the short amount of time they had. Much of the details weren't perfected, but this was the opportune chance to try it live. Push forward 63 floors from the 81st to the 18th, shouldn't be a problem, right? No one replied and no one cowered. In these circumstances, there had to be no problems. Luo Nan surveyed his surroundings. It seemed that he didn't understand what was going on. Well, that's logical. He was in a trance while they were all arguing and debating. There were 12 society members currently present at the Limestone Water Village pub. Among them include the heavily injured and unconscious Black Wolf and the Black Beetle who long since left the team. Only 10 people remained. Then there were the 4 professional bodyguards that Yuan brought with her. One was looking over the injured people, the Black Wolf and Shuele. That brought up the total people to be dispatched to 13. And they were to be dispatched in the centralized formation that Yuan had been mentioning all this time. Of course, this type of formation would require everyone to squeeze into one elevator. The 13 people were divided into 2 batches. Luo Nan, Yuan, Zhang Yingying, 3 bodyguards, and the society's Crag Burst 1 entered an elevator for a total of 7 people. This was the greatest force they could muster to protect Luo Nan. The remaining 6 people maintained a certain distance. They went through the fire escape passageways to rappel rapidly down the outside of the building, and conforming with the movements of Luo Nan's group, the hexaear was used to maintain communications throughout. As soon as someone were to receive an attack from the human-faced arachnid, or as soon as Luo Nan formed a clear-cut reaction, they would rapidly assist and enclose around the enemy. Their tactics were simple and crude, but they were extremely in line with these circumstances that formed in the last moment. And only awakened were able to realize a direct and advancing method such as this. Among the team was Cat Eyes, who possessed nimble and lithe agility as well as the ability of super-far perception. She naturally became the scout of the team, heading foremost and in front. She was also one of the members who was rappelling down the outside of the building. Shadows and glows interweaved with darkness and light on the floor, and the freezing autumn wind assaulted their faces. Things were quite relaxing before, but now mental frustrations were unable to be vented from the mind. Cat Eyes really did hope that her trapped, bounded, and suppressed state would turn for the better once she was far away from Luo Nan. But when she deliberately broke off ahead to pull a distance away that was over 100 meters, the incorporeal chains still remained in existence. The chain links even continued to lock into place. They produced a ka-chunk sound that only she could hear in a slow yet not hurried pace. She could not help shivering every time a ka-chunk sounded out. Her physical distance from Luo Nan was now great, but she was clearly pressing closer and closer with the controller of the chains on the mental plane. This distance was absolutely not an intimate one, but rather one of certain terror becoming magnified and warped. Luo Nan's current state of mind was peaceful and a bit repressed. From Cat Eyes' perspective, it was like there were gray clouds in the desert skies pressuring down over her head. She was unconsciously stifled. She could still hold on at the present, but she didn't dare to imagine what would happen if Luo Nan's mood were to turn irritable and furious. In what manner would she depart from this life? "Kitty, you're too far ahead," Zhang Yingying reminded her through the hexaear. Cat Eyes gave a snort under her breath, and her high heels dug into the glass wall, leaving behind a long gash and letting her come to a stop against her downwards momentum. She had some malevolent thoughts of conjecture in her mind. Is Zhang Yingying a puppet? Was she tied and controlled by Luo Nan? Constantly wagging her tail and begging for mercy. Does His Majesty Wu Huangtu know about this? But soon reason and intuition soon told her. This was clearly not the case. There was only one poor and unfortunate devil nearby, and it was solely her. This answer made Cat Eyes even more irritated. Currently, Cat Eyes was in front and had already reached the 20th floor. With an area of a diameter of 50 meters wide, the upper and lower 5 floors were all within the range of her senses. She followed the plan and threw her body into a corridor of the building. She walked down the fire escape and informed the others of the situation at the same time. Indeed, it's karaoke, a club that's distasteful looking at that. Snort. People here are seriously young. Ah, kids these days. She entered the club, which was decorated in a blurry and strange style and was the same in the majority of similar venues. It was as if she was in a maze. Cat Eyes actually matched the venue quite well with her scorching hot dress. The whelps that she passed by would cast blank glances at her. The occasional server she came across would become mystified by her heavy makeup and outfit. She slipped past by with her hypnotizing skills. Cat Eyes swayed her long legs. She looked to be moving leisurely, but actually, she moved nimbly and had already passed through all the relevant rooms within 3 stories. At last, she arrived at the 16th floor. According to the indicator of the map, this was the center of the composition of the 6 glowing stars, the largest room of the bunch. And right now there was a fervent party going on right now. She didn't have to enter the room. From the sight, hearing, and smell senses of her super-far perception ability, she had the situation in the room formed clearly in her mind. Cat Eyes lazily transmitted a question. No ability users have been discovered. Do you want an on-site reconnaissance? This time it was Hiyuan's turn to speak. Don't damage the scene. Wait for Mr. Luo to arrive before handling things. The communications had just ended when someone walked over rocking from behind. It was a young lad. His age couldn't have been more than 20. But clearly, he was extremely experienced. He pretended he was dizzy and distracted, and he reached out a probing hand to grope Cat Eyes' butt, which was sticking quite far out. But when the distance was 2 centimeters away, the young drunkard felt pain in his hand. Then, for some unfathomable reason, his body fell and collided with the wall. The young drunkard's emotions went dark. But he suddenly went stupefied before his anger could rise. Cat Eyes spoke not a word as she leaned against the wall. Her skin-tight and flashy dress revealed her sexy protruding contours. The black fishnet stockings wrapped around her legs. And her high heels stretched around her foot. All this together with the floor and the wall naturally formed the earth-shattering sight of a model. Her free-flowing curly hair covered up half her cheeks. Her red lips like fire slightly opened and closed to form a smile that was not like a smile. Little boy, got a smoke? The young drunkard immediately forgot the bitter experience that happened previously. He chuckled and giggled. I don't have any on me. But there's some inside. We of the Mystic Arts Research Society 3 deal with the stuff. How about we? He reached out with his hand to touch Cat Eyes' towering bosom, but he was met with another sight of the world spinning. This time he immediately fainted when colliding with the wall. 1. Crag burst, literally burst crag. 2. Wu Huang, literally martial emperor, is implied to be Zhang Yingying's boss, chapter 19.2. He is referred to as His Majesty quite a bit, so it's implied that he's quite a big shot. 3. Mystic Arts Research Society is the society that Luo Nan wanted to apply to and has been frequently mentioned in the story starting in chapter 1. It has been described to be filled with rich kids living lives of debauchery by Luo Nan's sister Moya. Luo Nan had missed the entrance interview to the society due to early events on ship Lanshan. But later, Xie Junping came up with a plan to have Luo Nan join the Mystic Arts Research Society by first having Luo Nan enter the Declining Order Club, then the Mystic Arts Research Society would acquire the assets of the Order Club and Luo Nan would thereby become a member of the Mystic Arts Research Society, chapter 26.2. However, this plan is currently in some trouble due to a new investor backing the competing bidder, the Construction Society, chapter 32.1. Chapter 43. Secret Order, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 43. Secret Order, Part 1/2. The skill that Cat Eyes displayed was ingenious. She had the young drunkard use his foot and shoulder for support against the wall. He was half leaning, half lying to maintain an unfallen body. Cat Eyes, this beautiful and bewitching woman, was also leaning against the wall. Together they formed the model case of a lecher meeting a succubus. They looked like they were about to fool around together immediately. The occasional server that passed by gave at most a glance of curiosity, they didn't have any other reactions. Cat Eyes waited by the entrance just like this. She even took out a cigarette in leisure and lit it while blurting out a sentence in the communications channel. What the F***CK is the Mystic Arts Research Society. There are 4 societies with the same name in the surrounding 6 schools. The mystic arts have been quite popular in recent years. The picture that Luo Nan drew was a variation of the Star of David. It seems that this wasn't a coincidence. Bamboo Pole was in charge of intelligence work. He indicated to Cat Eyes to lift up the drunkard's face to discern his identity, and soon he had the answer. Huang Bingzhen 1. Administrative Secretary of Acumen College's Mystic Arts Research Society. One of the second generation of money. Oh, Acumen College, Zhang Yingying let out a laugh containing a hidden meaning. Unfortunately, no one was able to understand this aside from Luo Nan. Bamboo Pole continued speaking. In addition, I've discovered some really awesome things within the club's database. Look at this. Contact name list, it's all female students, their profiles are all available and the list is abundant in every type. All that you could ever need is here. Wow. A strange silence emerged in the channel. It lasted until Crag Burst, who was next to Luo Nan, cursed out, revealing the secret. Why the hell are you charging people for this? Why don't you go die, Bamboo Pole? Crag Burst was a large and buff man who was nearly 2 meters tall. He had a nearly 10-year career experience with the military. Although his temperament was a bit rough, he was an extremely good choice for being a bodyguard and a shield. He was the one who revered and fitted with He Yueyin the most because of his military background. He realized he had made a mistake when he spoke and instinctively glanced over to He Yueyin. But He Yueyin's expression didn't change, as if she didn't hear anything. Bamboo Pole had sent out some business propositions in private channels. But in the end, he didn't forget to do what's expected of him. The database contains the signed agreement between the club and Acumen College's Mystic Arts Research Society. You can see that they remodeled 4 years ago, completely following and executing the designs requested by the society. And this society is also a large financial backer of this club. There are over 7 line items each year on their public budget report. As for private transactions, well, that's very unclear. The elevator arrived at the 16th floor, the same floor as Cat Eyes. The party of people was too big a target, servers had long since come over to question them. He Yueyin ignored the servers and directly asked Luo Nan. Mr. Luo. Luo Nan raised his head and saw the blurry and bizarre space of the club. The wall had an external coating with a special characteristic. Strange tree vines and flowery patterns twined around each and every round and mystical structures of magical symbols. The pale dark red glow was just like solvents in a laboratory entering through tubes. The glow flowed through the vines and flowery patterns to travel back and forth through the seemingly independent, magical symbols. After looking for quite a while, Luo Nan spoke in a low voice. The lighting effect here is very interesting. The server could clearly see who was it that stood centermost within this party of people and immediately revealed a standard smile. The style of our club follows the planning and designs of a specialized mystic arts team. This serves as bringing an entirely new and special experience for our customers. Luo Nan interrupted the server's cliché speech. Prepare a private room for us. Also, are the people of the Mystic Society still in room 1613? Room 1613 was none other than the room that Cat Eyes was keeping watch over. Before the server could nod, Luo Nan started heading over in that direction. There were 2 destinations. He Yuan instructed 3 bodyguards to wait in the private room. Then Zhang Yingying let the server prepare a fruit platter and red wine. She had the look of receiving a guest before playing around. And at the same time, He Yuan sent out an order on the psychic wave network. Octopus 2. Release hallucinogens. A young person wearing a funny cartoon shirt and a jacket came out from the restrooms nearby. He called out to Cat Eyes waiting outside room 1613 and directly entered the room. Cat Eyes followed close behind. She grabbed the young drunkard next to her and walked inside. The structure of room 1613 was extremely standard, a circular shape. In the center was flashy and dazzling projector equipment. The setup of the lighting fixture was very peculiar and was lighting up with a dim pink glow, smearing the already dusky room to become more disorderly. There were no sofas, chairs, or the like in the room. There were only a few mats. Everyone was casually sitting on the ground, playing and fooling around. There were 20 to 30 of them. However, these people were already under the influence of their own drugs, now they were also influenced by Octopus's hallucinogens. Their consciousnesses were chaotic. Whether these boys and girls were hugging each other, whether they were laughing or crying, they were completely ignorant of changes in the external world. The result was far too extreme. Even Octopus didn't expect this. He acted in a fluster to adjust his drug compositions to prevent derangement from arising in this group. Cat Eyes uttered some words to him, tossing the drunkard to the ground in passing. Hurry up. They're already outside the door. Someone knocked on the door while she was talking. Then the door opened and a server entered in with a nod. When he saw this scene, he actually had an appearance containing zero surprise and stood straight very naturally. The server spoke to Octopus, who still possessed a clear mind. Guests have arrived. Luo Nan's party of people already walked inside before he could finish talking. Oh hey. Lil Nanster. Octopus ignored the matter with the drugs. He met Luo Nan with an appearance of being pleasantly surprised with seeing a close friend of many years. He welcomed Luo Nan with great laughter and gave Luo Nan an extremely strong hug. This clumsy and lifeless acting made He Yuan frown just looking at it. Anyway, the server really didn't discover anything wrong, leaving after Zhang Yingying accepted the fruit platter and red wine. The objective of taking over someone else's room, like a dove occupying a magpie's nest, was completed. Luo Nan coughed and pushed away Octopus, ceasing the patting, which was overflowing with cordialness, as well. Luo Nan looked around inside the room and saw how messy the circumstances were. He didn't know what he should say for quite some time. Zhang Yingying casually pinched a piece of fruit and sent it down her mouth to taste. She spoke ambiguously. Do you feel very disappointed? It seemed you nearly became one of them. Luo Nan responded without thinking. It seems that there are many places that could use me. Looks like there's nothing to fear about a lack of positions. Ha! Luo Nan no longer paid attention to Zhang Yingying. He turned towards Octopus with a laugh. Bro Octopus. This composition of drugs is quite splendid. Give me some pointers in the future, K. Octopus was completely lost. He could only chuckle. You're flattering me. You're flattering me. Cat Eyes shot them a cold glance and let out some shots. Bunch of trash. Their group turned from being guests to hosts, chatting away in the room. But He Yuan didn't forget the most important matter from start to finish. As she surveyed the decorations in the room and the figures on the walls, her eyebrows furrowed tighter and tighter. She stepped over a body lying horizontally on the ground and walked in front of the center projection equipment. She carefully examined the medieval-style lighting fixture. Luo Nan no longer squandered time with Zhang Yingying and the others at this time. He continued to observe with his senses, paying attention to the patterned lines on the floor, which were rather gorgeous. Under the cover of human bodies, the broken and continuous lines of patterns ran through the connections of several geometric figures, leading towards the concentrated mass in the center. Ultimately, Luo Nan's gaze was cast towards the lighting fixture, and it just so happening to collide with He Yuan's gaze. Mr. Luo. Luo Nan gave her a nod. The human-faced arachnid should have appeared here. 1. Huang Bingzhen, literally yellow grasping resonance. Huang, yellow, is a fairly common last name. He's probably a minor character. 2. Octopus, literally octopus. Chapter 43. Secret Order, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. I believe that everyone in the area is nourishment for the human-faced arachnid. Luo Nan pointed at the wriggling and giggling human bodies in their surrounding. The human-faced arachnid craved these negative emotions, it really had a soft spot for them. He continued speaking after a moment's hesitation. There are also these line patterns. This should be a magical symbol. I don't know very much about the mystic arts. Is there someone who's more of an expert than me? Zhang Yingying raised her hand from behind on the spot. I've played with tarot cards before. Does that count? He Yuan could make out what Luo Nan was hesitating to say, and she spoke directly. Mr. Luo, sir, currently you are our only person who's qualified to make judgments about the human-faced arachnid. There's no need to draw others in to explain. Zhang Yingying stuck out her tongue. Luo Nan scratched his head, but in the end, he continued down his reasoning. At first I believed that these decorative vines, flowery patterns, and magical symbols, were just goods, they had no practical purpose. But here, there's a portion of line patterns that seem to display effects. Like drawing water through a canal, a portion of energy converges together over here. Luo Nan pointed to the projector of the lighting fixture. He didn't need to use his psychic methods to come to this conclusion, just using his eyes was fine. The remains of those lines and that lighting fixture were similar to the residue of the dark red spores on the warship. They too were slowly evaporating from the room. He Yuan was unable to see this residue, but she took out a small and exquisite mist sprayer from her pocket. Luo Nan could guess the general purpose of this. It should contain a special substance similar to the shadow mist one, and the substance should be able to capture the vestiges of the darksider life form meddling with reality. Indeed, there exists the relevant ray residue. Zhang Yingying walked over at this time, leaning on Luo Nan's shoulder and looking at the lighting fixture. A while passed before she spoke to He Yuan, who was carefully observing the fixture as well. The situation appears to be complex. Is a secret order involved? He Yuan grunted, she didn't respond immediately. Secret order. Luo Nan didn't understand. They are a sort of baffling thing. A very troublesome organization of lunatics. Luo Nan stared at Zhang Yingying. You said that ability users haven't formed any secret societies too. The world doesn't deal in absolutes. And this isn't a secret society. It's an evil cult, okay? Zhang Yingying saw that He Yuan hadn't responded for a time. She shrugged at Luo Nan. Just think about it. There are 600,000 ability users in the entire world. At most 1/10 of them have a relatively complete practice system and train steadily and honestly. Most of the remaining 500,000 plus possess certain abilities through a complete mystery. If there's no one to guide them, many of them grow to have inflated egos. They consider themselves to be some new human race. Some child of God, and so on. They believe that they stand at the apex of humanity, so they believe they can do whatever they please. Things are quite like this in novels and comics, right? Hee. Going hee is useless. This is the reality. Of course, the majority of these retards will be taught by the police on how to conduct themselves. If they can't beat exo-armors, then they can't tout some sh*t about being a child of God or a holy infant. The more annoying ones are handled by the military's burners. Then the society cooperates with the military to welcome them into our organization for rehabilitation and observation. Zhang Yingying spread her hand. But in the end, there are still some very special fellows. They can be considered the gifted class of the gifted class. Indeed, they are extremely difficult to deal with. Even within the society, I'm afraid that even the most top-notch ability users of the same type would find it hard to communicate with them. They don't approve of the society's ability system and its designations. They believe that there's a different explanation. But their explanation often involves using their abilities to wrap firmly around religion, legends, mystic arts, other existing theories, or perhaps rich imagination, to superficially present themselves. The end result is that they start schools and teachings. Several secret sects are formed by people to advance their exquisite theories and validate their imagination in this world. The problem is, they themselves may be tremendous, but their relevant theories are extremely absurd. If one were to practice according to their theories, more than half would die tragic deaths. But this is unavoidable. The illustrious power of mystics and sages is more kick-ass than 10,000 truths. Large quantities of people enter into these sects just as usual. They dedicate everything to these sects and are extremely devoted. These sects are quite a headache for the government. Naturally, they are quite the headache for the society as well. Luo Nan was able to hear the hidden implications. In other words, the society can't take these people. We're holding back against evil in fear of harming the innocent. The leaders of these sects are morons, but their strength is truly powerful. In addition, these sects are planted deeply in the cities. To rummage through with our current population density, you might as well just set off a nuclear warhead in the middle of the city. Hey, believe it. Think of the human-faced arachnid and our D district. Luo Nan was speechless for a time and was a bit lost in thought. Do those powerful ability users really possess the terrifying destructive capability of a nuclear warhead? This information was stimulating. After returning from his thoughts, he simply spoke out the series of questions he had piled up in his heart. How does the society designate things in their ability system? What's really considered to be an awakened? Where do I stand in all of this? Zhang Yingying's mouth had already gone dry by talking so much in her explanation of secret orders. She rushed to eat some fruits to replenish herself. She waved her hand to indicate that she heard him and spoke ambiguously. You have the hexayear already. Go look yourself. I believe that Mr. Luo has already achieved a portion of it, and may have even exceeded the level of an ordinary awakened. But you're extremely specialized. O.org. He Yuan had suddenly entered the conversation, and she had given quite the explicit judgment. Zhang Yingying went, hey, and shouted. Let's not talk about this for now. How's the matter with this order? Luo Nan really wanted to whip her. Ultimately, He Yuan was more concerned with their proper business. She responded. I've already notified the society, we will first withdraw. It can't be. We had such a strong start, but we're finishing so weak. Octopus, who was rushing to adjust his drug composition, lifted his head. We're ending things just like this. Actually, some leader of this order has been protesting against the actions of the society, that we've interrupted their sacred ritual. Octopus ate some shock. We've been discovered. Luo Nan was quite baffled. How were we discovered? Cat eyes glared at him quite unreasonably. You blaming me? Zhang Yingying's attention centered elsewhere. Sacred ritual, here. She immediately threw out the fruit platter, spread her hand, and laughed out. Who was it that spoke of holding back against evil in fear of harming the innocents just now? Everyone in the room had a different reaction, but He Yuan had the most cool-headed attitude. She responded. The leaders of this order spoke without logic, and the methods of secret orders exceed common sense. Regardless of anything, our target is the human-faced arachnid, not some secret order. This operation is now terminated. We will withdraw. I will create a briefing on all matters that happened and deliver it to the society and the hands of every one of you. This time, these words were transmitted using the psychic wave network. Then a strange cry of exasperation sounded within the encrypted channel. Zhang Yingying's eyebrows shot up. This order jumped quite high up in fright. You sure they aren't colluding with the human-faced arachnid? What's this order's name? Reveal it to me. He Yueyin didn't speak. She just shook her head to indicate to Zhang Yingying to look at the projection equipment of the lighting fixture in the middle of the room. It was unknown when, but the burning, pink glow of the lighting fixture could no longer be seen. And on the two sides of it was the emergence of a new image. There were two thin chains hanging down the sides, each one hanging a flat dish. One dish was black, the other was white. The two were in symmetry, hanging in the air motionless to form the typical style of a balance scale. This time Zhang Yingying's lips split into a grin. She wanted to talk, but in the end, her mouth remained shut. It was actually Octopus who whispered. Mommy. It's the Order of Justice. 1. Shadow Mist, was mentioned in Chapter 13.2. It was the method that the military used to detect the burning wraith on ship Lanshan. 2. Zhang Yingying made fun of Luo Nan for believing in secret societies and dark organizations in Chapter 18.2. Chapter 44. Extraordinaries, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 44. Extraordinaries, Part 1/2. Luo Nan saw that people's expressions were either astonished or grave, so he didn't ask any further. He simply used the hexaear to seek the answer. The solution soon leaped out in front of him upon using his consciousness to search. The Order of Justice. One of the three world-class secret orders, and one that is known in modern times. This secret order was the only order that didn't have an explicit personification of deities and gods as its holy object of worship. The highest leader of this order was called the First Oblatum One. Their holy object of worship was the scales of truth, and their fundamental doctrine was extremely unclear, containing only the following 9 words. The fairness of the world. The justice of truth. Within the order was a strong obsession toward sacrificial rituals, which were known as displacing equality, and were used to realize equilibrium in the world. Frankly speaking, Luo Nan didn't completely understand everything after seeing the overview for this information. He still needed to study some concepts further on his own. He Yueyin issued down the official order to retreat as of this moment. The ad hoc team was pretty much disbanded upon leaving the room. He Yueyin remained extremely strict, for she informed everybody not to remain idle near Cloud City Water Village before returning back to the society to receive their next order. She also informed everybody that it was best not to act solo. Although the human-faced arachnid had been heavily injured by her format of fire and couldn't possibly perform another offensive, the lone ability user was obviously the best tonic for the arachnid. Arg. What a sorry situation. Bamboo Pole let out a lamented sigh and added, "Good night everyone." Then he simply went offline. Everyone else also faded away one by one in the encrypted communications channel. Luo Nan took the initiative to call out to Octopus, adding this drug composition expert as a friend so he could contact him at any time. At the same time, he sent friend requests to Crag Burst and Cat Eyes. Crag Burst was quite straightforward, responding rather quickly. But Cat Eyes gave him a cold snort and just left. Luo Nan shrugged his shoulders. He could feel Cat Eyes' attitude towards him had become worse after their finished cooperation with the psychic drawing. Hey, be careful. Cat Eyes really keeps a grudge. Octopus had a decent impression towards Luo Nan. He patted Luo Nan on the shoulder and then left with Crag Burst. Luo Nan felt that he was very innocent. what did he do to Cat Eyes? The recoil at the beginning was due to Cat Eyes using her own ability to spy on Luo Nan during his divination, provoking the heavily chained crow into counter-attacking. Or perhaps, the mental senses of being an awakened allowed her to feel a piece of her information being scooped. Obviously, you were too rough. Zhang Yingying laughed delightedly as she slapped his back. Ignore Cat Eyes' flirtatious appearance. In reality, I've never seen her with a boyfriend since she entered the society. She may be a reserved old spinster. Should this woman start joking about his? Luo Nan was disinclined to acknowledge her. Then He Yuan spun her face towards him to unexpectedly enter into the conversation. Mr. Luo. In regards to the matter with Cat Eyes, your previous etiquette was somewhat inappropriate. Ha! Mr. Luo should have probed and utilized Cat Eyes' memories and subconscious during the course of creating the psychic drawing. In a certain sense, you violated her free will. Of course, this was certainly an accident by Mr. Luo, but it would be better to say some apologies after the matter. Luo Nan went hic, being a bit embarrassed. He Yuan continued supplementing him with this sort of common sense. As a mental enhancement type ability user, as a psychic, Mr. Luo will certainly encounter similar issues in the days to come. But all you need to do is remember this. Ability users are extremely sensitive about free will. Communication prior and explanations after are all extremely necessary. Luo Nan naturally received this lecture with an open mind. And at this time, he recalled the topic that was interrupted by Zhang Yingying. He saw that he would have no further opportunities for today if he didn't ask for a clear explanation now, so he opened his mouth in a hurry asking. Sis you said I'm seriously over-specialized too. He Yuan recalled this matter and muttered to herself before speaking. If I were to evaluate Mr. Luo's ability on the mental plane based off of the results I've seen from facing the human-faced arachnid, I would give you a C+ ranking, maybe even a B. But for the physical plane, I can only give you an F ranking. I can't rate you any higher. Zhang Yingying gave a laugh. You can't go any lower than that. Going lower means you're handicapped. Luo Nan's lips pulled into a frown. His body wasn't bad to that degree. He worked out for many years, tempered himself, his agility should be above normal. He Yuan shot a cold glance at Zhang Yingying before speaking seriously. The mental and the physical are seriously imbalanced. The consequences this brings are 100 times more serious than being handicapped. Whether it be in the military or in Quantum Corporation, there are countless cases like this that are dripping with blood. I am saying this because I hope Mr. Luo will realize the importance of this. Zhang Yingying was unable to keep laughing and Luo Nan went mute as well. Since Mr. Luo had previously mentioned formats, I will explain from the perspective of formatting. My general understanding of the meaning of Mr. Luo's alleged format is that it's different from the archetype format that I'm used to. It should be more personalized, focusing on an individual's characteristics. Is this correct? Luo Nan thought about it and nodded his head awkwardly. He Yuan's gaze focused on Luo Nan. Let's view the format to be some sort of building. An artist can use toothpicks to construct an enormous skyscraper. An architect can complete an entire set of design plans in the computer. But this is just a model, just data. The real and genuine building itself needs to be constructed from valid and resilient building materials. After all, the intrinsic nature of a building is its practical functionality. If things are like Mr. Luo says, sir, you possess a valid format. And so, you will need to select the most suitable building materials to construct this building to completion in a practical and solid manner. This aspect involves a complete transformation of Sir's body structure and mental willpower. It's absolutely not just visualization on the mental plane. If things were all just data, then things would be better. But as one who lives in the world of reality, fine and weak works of art made of toothpicks would collapse from a breath of air. They become pointless. Aha! A toothpick. Type boy. Zhang Yingying clapped her hands in great laughter. She cared not the slightest about rubbing salt in Luo Nan's wound. She never expected He Yuan to switch targets to her in the next moment. Miss Zhang. I know you bear no ill intentions towards Mr. Luo, but your customary jokes and sarcastic expressions can be easily misleading towards new members like him. For example, in the issue with orders, although I too disagree with how this secret order has handled things, I know that the abilities of the leaders of secret orders are all, by the book, a rank. In the 3 stages of the society's ability system, the Awakened 3, the Undertaker 4, and the Extraordinary 5, they are at the uppermost level. They are the strong that stand at the world's apex and they possess remarkable intelligence. They're absolutely not the sort of powerful lunatics you spoke of. Though you know what you're doing in your head, it's quite easy to have Luo Nan misunderstand things and have him form the wrong impression. For someone who is a psychic, this kind of false impression is very likely to be fatal. Zhang Yingying choked on her words in an instant, her eyebrows leaping straight up. She had previously slipped up in the operation, was criticized by He Yuan, and had nothing to say. But now her series of behavior was rebuked for being completely wrong. He Yuan, you sure are high and mighty. Luo Nan could feel that the atmosphere between the two had suddenly gone tense. Unfortunately, he was also involved, so he found things to be awkward for a time. Right when he was thinking of how to mediate the two with words, his wristband started to vibrate. Luo Nan saw the incoming number and his eyelids trembled. He put the call through in a hurry. Auntie. I see that the dinner party has already ended. Where are you? 1. First Oblatum, literally head/chief sacrifice. 2. Over. Literally slanted field. I mistranslated this as overboard in the last chapter. It has been fixed now. 3. Awakened, literally one who has awakened. 4. Undertaker, literally engineer. Could also mean undertaking, besides engineering. Can mean expert, teacher, or professional. 5. Extraordinary, literally extraordinary species. Chapter 44. Extraordinaries, Part February 2nd, you are listening at novelfull.audio. I'm still upstairs. Luo Nan was unable to mediate the conflict between the two women, so he had walked forward 2 steps to respond to his aunt in a whisper. His aunt was certainly waiting somewhere nearby, she had been waiting by herself until the dinner party was over. This sort of supervising action was not considered the least bit accidental to Luo Nan. This was his aunt's nature. Tonight she had the indomitable will to bring Luo Nan back home. She wouldn't allow Luo Nan any reason to refuse. If it were the past few days, Luo Nan would have certainly tried to escape from his aunt's evil clutches by every possible means. But today his drug production supplies were in a deficit. He would have nothing today even if he returned back to Blue Bay Community. His thoughts of refusal weren't that resolute. Luo Nan performed a few symbolic exchanges of refusal, but in the end, he still cast in his defeat. I'm together with my friends right now. I'll be down soon. Auntie, ma'am, where are you? I'll find you in a bit. It wasn't much to give his aunt this victory, but Luo Nan still had some concerns left. The influence from drug withdrawal weren't easily ignored. A sudden cut-off of his drug supply would likely cause some anomalies and variations within his nervous system. His format did what he wanted just now, but some reversal in progress seemed to happen because of it. How should he go about things to make it better? He looked at his friend list on the Hexaear and more or less gained some confidence. It seemed that he had truly gained an additional and alternative channel upon entering the society. First, he dealt with his aunt using yep s and s. Then he turned around to ask Zhang Yingying. Bro Octopus is quite the expert in drug synthesis. Does he sell his goods outs? Zhang Yingying blurted. Who do you harbor errant thoughts with? It was impossible to proceed with this conversation. Sister he, unleash your might. Twist her to be properly educated. Luo Nan rolled his eyes. He felt that it would be better to directly communicate with Octopus. But perhaps his expression was too obvious, leading Zhang Yingying to be discontent and rein in his collar with his hand. Hey! Speak clearly. What are you up to? Doing business with Octopus, 9.5 times out of 10, involves bad things. Oh. Hold on. Zhang Yingying suddenly reached out her hand to turn his face, but obviously, Luo Nan wouldn't let her do so. He was unable to resist her, however, for this woman's strength far exceeded his own by an unknown factor. Just how many times did this make? Luo Nan's face flushed red. He was somewhat unable to restrain his anger. He Yueyin couldn't bear to keep watching, her eyebrows furrowed as she sought to stop Zhang Yingying. But Zhang Yingying called out to her, appearing to have forgotten her former enmity. Come. Let's look together. I felt that there was something abnormal about this kid's pupils. It seems he took too many drugs. Explain clearly, Kay. Do you normally have this nasty habit? How did she become so sensitive all of a sudden? Luo Nan was shocked for a moment, forgetting to struggle. Zhang Yingying forcefully peeled his eyelids back, but what could she see under the dusky lighting of the club? He Yueyin pulled on Zhang Yingying's arm, speaking in a very low voice. Don't cause a ruckus. We still haven't left this order's domain. Luo Nan was finally able to wrest free from Zhang Yingying's controlling grasp, but he was still gritting his teeth in depression. What the heck was up with this woman's monstrous strength? Was his body really weak to the point of being a cripple under the eyes of an awakened? He vented with hate in secret. He'll wait until his fleshly body reaches an equilibrium with his mind, when he truly becomes an awakened. Then he will have a proper talk with Zhang Yingying. In any case, He Yueyin had already interrupted Zhang Yingying, so Zhang Yingying no longer looked into the matter of Luo Nan taking drugs. Luo Nan also didn't want to stay with Zhang Yingying for now. Originally he wanted to leave immediately, but then he thought of Shui Lei and Chen Xiaolin placed on the 81st floor. He had to go see what their conditions were like. He made it to the 81st floor without any problems, but the sound of clamor came over upon leaving the elevator and entering the corridor. Luo Nan didn't pay attention to it at first, but after a few steps, he saw outlines of people strewn at random. There were servers, medical personnel, He Yueyin's bodyguards, and so on. They were talking outside a door. Shui Lei should have been lying down in the room, but he was outside leaning against the wall with his head drooping down. He looked to be extremely dismayed. Luo Nan had a good impression of this fellow student who possessed a straightforward temperament and high martial abilities. But after their shoulder-to-shoulder combat together, Luo Nan felt that something was different. He asked in a probing nature upon walking over. Leister, you all right? Shui Lei lifted his head from hearing Luo Nan's voice. He saw Luo Nan and his eyes lit up for a moment. Nanster, you're all right. That thing just a moment ago. Arg. A multitude of loose ends, ones that Shui Lei didn't know how to even start talking about. In the end, Shui Lei could only wave his hand. It was difficult to continue the conversation. What's the matter? He Yueyin asked the bodyguard in charge of looking after the injured. The bodyguard could only force a bitter smile and brief her on the circumstances that transpired. There were 3 patients. Shui Lei had only been knocked unconscious by He Yueyin, his body didn't receive any injuries, so he was the first to wake up. He was easy to talk to, easy to calm down, and he even went to look after his unconscious girlfriend. He looked after her all the way until the doctors, which were called by He Yueyin, had arrived. Black Wolf's spine was broken, so he had been lifted out for an operation early on. As for Chen Xiaolin, she was undergoing treatment locally. Who knew that things were fine as long as Chen Xiaolin was not awake? As soon as she woke up, as soon as she saw Shui Lei, her mood became stirred with emotions of terror, of anger, and of depression. She even chased Shuelei out of the room and startled the servers of this floor. She was awfully noisy. She lost control of her mood. Luo Nan immediately thought of the human-faced arachnid, and clearly, He Yuan had thought the same way. The two crossed eyes for a single glance, then both entered the room. He Yuan actually blocked him for a moment, allowing Zhang Yingying to come over. The smile on this woman's face had become far weaker. The noble aura on her body grew thick. Clearly, she had accumulated energy waiting to be unleashed. But when Luo Nan entered the room, he didn't find anything eye-catching. There was nothing exceptional at all. Chen Xiaolin was in a deep sleep on the bed. Other than her being weak, there were no traces whatsoever of the human-faced arachnid. The three people exchanged gazes. All were somewhat stunned. The doctor was extremely dissatisfied to these three people who had suddenly barged in the room. The patient was just tranquilized. She needs to recuperate. All unrelated people, get out. He Yuan faced towards Luo Nan to confirm that her problem really didn't involve the human-faced arachnid. She then indicated to Luo and Zhang to leave first. She stayed behind to talk to the doctor. Not even a few minutes later, He Yuan came out the room. It stressed symptoms from facing incomprehensive facts that exceeded her common sense. She refused to be touched, has serious rejection, and maybe she has selective memories. Members of the society come across these cases frequently. Zhang Yingying shrugged. I have suggested early on, ever since the mutants one exploded to 10 times their number after the war, that we should broaden the scope of common sense for the ordinary citizen. Let them become accustomed to the existence of ability users. Humph. Those mutant species, those unscientific playthings, have wreaked havoc for several dozen years already. Yet so many people continue to bury their heads in the sand. Luo Nan finally understood. So it turned out that Chen Xiaolin was unable to accept the sudden life or death fighting between Shuelei and the Black Wolf. Then there was also the human-faced arachnid. And even the effects of Luo Nan's hypnotism. All these caused the issues with her mind. He Yuan gave a suggestion. It's best if you let your friend go home first. He'll only make the patient more anxious if he's nearby. Zhang Yingying shot a glance at the still dejected Shuelei. Your friend is quite the material. His foundation is much better than yours. His adaptive ability is quite strong. He should be the disciple of some martial artist master. Luo Nan quite approved of her conjecture. When they were in the elevator, Shuelei's reactions were really admirable. He even suspected that Shuelei's big body had sensed the threat of the human-faced arachnid through intuition. Anyway, Zhang Yingying's decent behavior didn't even last a dozen seconds before she started talking smack. This kid's clearly about to topple over from depression. You might as well introduce your friend into the society to find people similar to him. This sort of transparent and buff guy will certainly be more popular than some tooth-pick boy. Luo Nan glared at Zhang Yingying before asking He Yuan with a few questions about Chen Xiaolin's condition. Then he walked towards Shuelei. Sister Chen's condition isn't that bad. The doctor will take good care of her and we can't really help much by sticking around. Let's first go back home. Shuelei shook his head, as expected. I'm still going to wait here. Luo Nan pressed against his arm. Sister Chen will be sent to the hospital to receive follow-up treatment. She just needs a few days of peace and quiet and then she will be good. She needs to calm down. Let's go. It's getting late. My auntie's car is downstairs. We'll send you back on the way home. When Luo Nan spoke of calming down, Shuelei clearly dropped his head even lower. Luo Nan sighed. He used some force to pull Shuelei up. Of course, Shuelei's mind was wavering right now. Otherwise, how would Luo Nan have been able to move him? He faced He Yuan, Zhang Yingying, and the others for goodbyes. Then Luo Nan and Shuelei left side by side. They just so happened to enter the elevator where Xue Lei had engaged in combat with the Black Wolf. Xue Lei looked at the remnant traces of the conflict within the elevator walls and was lost in thought for some time. Then he suddenly spoke. "You guys aren't ordinary people, right? You're not either. I have to say, this is fate." Luo Nan smiled and extended a fist out toward Xue Lei. Xue Lei was stunned for a moment, but he also extended his own fist to lightly bump with Luo Nan's. Then his lips split into a grin. 1. Mutants, literally distorted species. It's been a while since this term was used, so here's a brief reminder. Mutants emerged in large numbers after the Third War, Chapter 13.1. It's implied that they drove people to live in large metropolises, and here we have more evidence that ability users have been fighting mutants. In Chapter 22.2, President Ouyang of the Xia City branch of the Wilderness Explorer Society announced the threat of the human-faced arachnid, that the arachnid is a mutant, and that it's the first live specimen to come from the gate, which is what they believe to be the source of the mutant species.